Hello and welcome to Quilt Addicts Anonymous. I'm Stephanie Soebbing. Today we're going to bring a tutorial for you on how to really bring your panels to life with quilting. We're going to do a quilting play-by-play, which is where I've strapped a GoPro to my long arm handles, and then I'm going to watch back the footage and talk you through the decisions I made when I was quilting. This is a very special project. When I put together my book, the Panel Quilting Workshop, which you can get a signed copy of over at shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com, it was really important to me to show all levels of quilting for the different projects, because the beauty of a panel is that you can have a very fast, very easy quilt to put together that doesn't need a whole lot in terms of quilt treatment. And then you also can really make that panel and the design on it pop if you do some really fancy stuff, which is what I've done in this one. This is the panel wall hanging tutorial. So for this one, it's a very simple pattern that shows you how to essentially create a frame around your panel, which is fabulous. And then you can change them out seasonally, which is what I did. I quilted up 4 of these for the book, and they all come from different seasons. And I used panels from Stephanie Brandenburg of Frond Design Studios, because her panels actually start as art on canvas. And so it is really a beautiful way to meld actual fine art with your quilting. Now, for this particular one, I took out all the stops. I spent about 6 to 8 hours on each panel. I included at least half a dozen thread changes in each one, and I did something really special with the batting. I layered a polyester on the bottom and a wool batting on top. What that does is it, one, makes your quilt very stiff. So when it hangs on the wall, it's going to look like a piece of flat art, as opposed to a maybe floppy kind of thin bat. So it's going to add that extra stability, and it also is going to really make your quilting pop, because the combination of having that wool on top really gives you a lot of dimension in your quilting, which helps make a lot of these ideas and really anything you can come up with really just pop forward. So this was a really fun project for me to do these and really stretch myself creatively when it comes to long arming. And really my guide was the colors and the design. And so I kind of had ideas when I went into it, but I also really kind of just let the fabric speak to me, and I tried to tamp down the background as much as I can and let the painted design really pop out. So let's go ahead and watch the quilting play-by-play. So one of the most important things you're going to do when you are doing a framed piece like this is I want to make sure that my borders are very square. So the first thing I'm doing is kind of a modified stitch in the ditch to go around this. That quilting tool, by the way, is a 4-in-1 tool by Natalia Bonner. I love it. I use it all the time when I'm doing ruler work. And what I'm doing is I am just stitching just like 1 needle width to the side of where that seam is. Actually, that's a lie. I am doing a 1/4 inch in, because it can be a little challenging to be right on when you are doing a project like this. Because I like to press my seams open, you can't really stitch in the ditch when you do that. You can stitch right next to that seam line, and I do it often. But this is a nice little trick to where if you are quilting a 1/4 inch away, you can still get that really nice straight line, and you can go a little bit faster because you're not having to really focus on making sure that you are right next to where you want to be. So this is still achieving the same effect by making sure that first my borders look super square, like a frame on a wall, and that's great. And there's a couple of ways that you can line this up. In all of these cases, when you have a ruler foot on your machine, you are always going to be, your needle will be a 1/4 inch away from where your edge of your ruler foot is on all sides. So as long as that's lined up with the edge, you're good to go. The other way is, you can see there's some lines on that ruler, and you can also use that to line up and have your measurements, so that way you can follow along with that. Now I'm doing the same thing I just did, just now I'm lining up that ruler foot with the inside of that first border. So right now that ruler foot is right on the seam that borders the first border and the panel. And again, this just gets me some really nice straight lines. It's going to look really nice and sturdy, especially because I'm going to do a lot more organic quilting within the rest of the panel. And this will just keep everything nice and square, so when it goes on the wall, it will look square, because there's nothing worse than hanging something on your wall and it's like doing one of these things. We don't want that. We want it to be nice and straight and square. This helps. So this is always step number one for me, is to secure that first border in some way. And I'm using a celery green thread for this point. This is kind of a project where you want to have a lot of different thread colors available to you. And this one I definitely changed out a lot. So this is what I told you I do before, where it's that modified stitch in the ditch. Now, again, I press the seam open, so there is no ditch. The ditch is created when you press a seam underneath, and there's a low side and a high side. So what I am doing is I am stitching as close to that seam as possible, with trying not to get in the seam. Now, there is an old wives' tale out there that if you press your seams open and you stitch over in your seam, you're going to break the thread. And I am here to tell you that there's over 150 quilts behind me that have been quilted like this, and I've never had that problem. So don't worry about that. Just use a good high quality thread, change your needle out. You're not going to have any issues. But my goal here, you can see I'm going a lot slower, because I am just trying to stitch right next to that seam and really just take my time and go nice and slow. The other thing that you'll see is I'm not really going to the edges of the 4-in-1 tool. I am starting and stopping about 2 inches in the middle. I don't want to go any further than that toward the edge, because I will lose control, and then all of a sudden that ruler will start to turn on me, and then I won't be able to maintain that straight line. So do pay attention to that when you are utilizing this technique, but it's a great one to use when you're trying to get like a modified stitch in the ditch. So there had been a thread change in between the green border and now. So I am working now with blue fabric, and I'm doing a couple of things. I want to kind of create still that frame look here. So I'm just doing lines back and forth. You can see I'm not using a ruler to do this, because I do want it to look kind of organic. And I also am kind of going around that swirl, and I'm not changing threads even though it's red, but I want to sort of accent the texture whenever I come to those paint splatter bits. And this is a decision that is going to be different for every single one of these that you do. I really just let the fabric tell me what it would like to become. And I do that whenever I'm designing and when I'm quilting. And you can see I'm just doing, it's not quite matchstick quilting, but it is really close back and forth. Now, when you do this and you commit to going so close back and forth, you're committing. You're making a very big commitment to that. You're going to have to maintain this for all the borders going around, or it's going to look super weird and it might not hang flat. But this was a really good way to kind of tamp down the areas that I don't want to pop, because what I want to show off is the really gorgeous flower that's in the center, and I want the rest of it to kind of fade into the background. And so by quilting so close together on this border, that's going to give me that ability to do that. Now we're coming up on another one of those drops. So what we're going to do here is we're just kind of going over a little. And another reason for, we're going to do a circle in here, and we're just going to kind of swoop around, show off that texture, work our way back out. It's really not that different than doing a swirl, just it's a lot more dense. But another really good reason to go around and do that modified stitch in the ditch is it gives you a place to travel when you're doing something like this on your border. It can be piano keys where you're doing it every 2 inches, and it still is a really good idea. So watch what I'm doing here. I'm coming down and then I'm traveling within that area that I've already stitched around, and it's not going to look weird because I'm being really careful to travel right over the stitching lines. Now, I don't always need to get out my ruler in order to maintain that when I'm going tiny little distances like this. But if I were moving an inch, you know, even more than a half inch, I probably would have that ruler to guide me along as well. So I'm using a ruler here because I want to make sure that I had a nice straight line to start with when I change direction. And you can tell there's kind of a little bit of directionality to the print that I used for the border, where you can kind of see the striations of where the paint was going up and down. So in that top border, they're kind of going, you know, left, right, or it's up, down actually on the actual quilt, because that's the top. And this one, it's more left, right. And so I'm kind of following with my lines rather than doing big swooping ones going what would be up and down. I'm just continuing to go outside. And then every time I hit one of those swirls, we're going to break it up and we're going to allow the fabric to tell us what it wants to be. And we're going to do a little bit of swirl in there to kind of add just a little bit extra texture, but it's still very dense because again, I want to kind of tamp that down. So what you're seeing here is I am basting the edge of that quilt down. Again, this is another way to make sure to keep everything looking nice and straight. And then I'm going to work my way with one of those lines over, and we're going to use that 4-in-1 tool to do that modified stitch in the ditch and be able to keep that really nice and tidy and looking like it's an actual frame piece of artwork. Now, when I do one of these, what I typically do, and it works 75% of the time, is I will do the entire border first. Or sometimes if I have a lot of really big background area, I will do that within the center as well. But you can see I've just moved straight on to the border next, and this is the second roll, and I'm just working my way back and forth on this. Now that's going to look a little different if you're doing it on your home sewing machine. You're going to want to start at the center and work out. But to me, what really matters here is that we have a nice crisp border, so that's what I'm doing. So while I have the blue on, you can see I have it rolled just far enough to where I can get as much of the panel within the throat of my long arm as possible. And I'm going to go over some of the blue bits while it's in the machine so I have one less thread change to do. And this is where the art of it, and you can really start to play, happens. So what I'm doing is I'm kind of following the lines of the brush strokes, and they are wild. You know, they're kind of all over the place, but it allows me to really kind of follow the texture of the paint that is already in there. And I'm really kind of just trying to match where the color makes sense. And this really kind of allows me to really just be free with it. Kind of treat the thread as if it were paint too, and really kind of have some fun with it. And really my only thought process here is, does the thread match, and am I following the lines of painting? So that's really all I'm doing. And these are that's essentially a giant wavy line. And if you want to learn how to do some of this stuff, we have a Intro to Free Motion Quilting course where you learn 4 basic quilting stitches that are free motion quilting, and then you learn how to modify them. So this is absolutely something you could do. So this paint splatter was really, really fun to work with. And to be able to quilt up all those paint lines and really kind of add to the texture with my thread and my quilting choices, and to be able to go into this bubble was just so, so fun. You can see I'm doing that pretty dense, pretty dense. And now this is where it really gets fun. So I wanted to follow the lines of paint that were dripping down. And so I'm really just trying to quilt within that line and stick in it as well as I can. And then I'm traveling back down because I still have a few more things that I want to hit with the blue thread before I change. So that gets me back to my main area. See, I'm following the lines of stitching to kind of make my way out. And then I'll hit any other blue that I have. All right, now we've got a black thread, And I'm going to get a lot of real estate out of this one because that entire floral is outlined in black. So you can see I'm going up the big stem of it. I'm trying to stay within the line of the stem, but kind of hug the edge of it. And again, there's no like rule that says you have to do it this way. It's just what I wanted to do. Now I'm going to work my way back down the other side. So that way the stem actually looks like a nice thick stem popping up, because remember I used that double bat, and that wool is really going to pop up in the center of that stem. But I do need to make my way back up because I have more outlining to do. So we're going to go through the center this time. And then what I did was I actually outlined all of these little bits. So you can see I've got my little paint drip. And this was a labor of love here because there are so many lines, as you can see, and I literally went over every single one of them. So I went really slow and I just made sure I didn't skip any, and I just followed along. And if I needed to travel over, no big deal. I was totally fine with that. And you can see I got off a little bit there. The grand scheme of things, you don't really notice. It's fine. But you can see I'm even doing these little wispies. And it was so fun. And when it was all said and done, it created this beautiful texture where the white within the flower really just popped. It was so, so gorgeous when everything was said and done. And I don't know that we're gonna see it in this filming that I did, but I also outlined all those other paint drips, like the yellow got a yellow, going down that paint strip, as so did the reds and the purple and everything else. So that way when you're looking at it, the texture of the paint on the fabric was echoed, and it really is so stunning. I love how this turned out. Now we're going to go to the background. So this is white, and I really wanted, and I only did this in the background, not within the center of the flower petals, but what was clearly not flower. I wanted to have as close to 1/4 inch quilting lines as I could. It doesn't mean that I measured it all. You can see I'm really just kind of free guiding this. I'm not using any tools to do it, but I'm going to go all the way up to where that flower is, and then I'm going to use my previous stitching line as my guide to go back down. Now you can get off on this. It's really easy to kind of have it start straight and then it kind of goes to the side. So kind of keep an eye on that. Try and keep it nice and tidy, especially in one like this where the lines are going up and down in the final design. We don't want it to be kind of weird looking. So you can see I'm taking my time to do it, and eventually I'm going to run into that stem and I'm going to kind of quilt around the side of it in a similar way that I was quilting around the sides of the swirls of drops of paint within that second border. But you can see I'm just going really slow back and forth. And one of the reasons why I loaded this on sideways is because I knew I wanted to do this, and I wanted to be able to be going straight back and forth with those lines. If I would have loaded the quilt top to bottom like normal, then I would be breaking thread all the time in order to keep this up, or I would have had to choose a different way to accomplish something similar. So you can see I've hit that stem. And so I kind of hug the side of it, trying to stay in the white and not in the black to get all the way down to the bottom. And then once I follow that curve and the edge of my ruler foot is about even with my previous line of stitching, that's when I can continue on again and continue to create that section where it really looks like the background is just really like matchstick quilted. And I love this because it tamped down everything. And you might be like, Stephanie, why did you use a double bat if you're trying to tamp down everything? It's because I wanted the flower to pop. And you will see in the end that the flower really popped because I did not quilt at all in the center of that flower. You can see when I come up to it, it's already starting to look on that kind of left top area where it's patted down, and you can already see that it's popping within the floral. So that is really, really fun. So now for this section, since it's much smaller, I did go ahead and grab the 4-in-1 just because then I could whip through it a little bit faster when I have that guide and still be pretty confident that I'm doing a good, nice, straight up and down job. So what I do is I can just kind of whip down and move my ruler a little bit, follow the line of that stem to get back to it, and then just hug that edge of the ruler with that ruler foot. And that really kind of just allows me to move a little bit quicker, but I also don't have to worry too much about it being super perfect because it's not ruler work in the sense of like we're creating these gorgeous shapes. This is just helping me stay straight up and down. Well, I hope you've enjoyed watching this quilting play-by-play with me. It actually has been about a year since I quilted this, so it was kind of like I remembered what I did, but I had to like jog my memory a little bit as I went through it. But it's always fun to like peek in the head of what are my quilting decisions. And always, especially when I'm doing something like this where I really want the design to look like art and I want to accentuate the design, I'm going to pay a lot of attention to my thread choice. So that way the thread is not detracting from what I'm trying to do. I want it to blend in, and I do have a massive thread stash for that particular reason. And then I'm also going to choose my quilting designs to help highlight what it is that I'm trying to do. In this case, that white in that background, it was all tamped down. I was able to create that up and down texture look, and because I quilted everything so densely where the color was and where that background was, it really made that whole floral pop because of that double bat choice of the poly and wool. And also by wildly quilting within the paint splatters, it also really differentiated the painted sort of drips of the panel from the very regimented matchstick background, which then differentiated from the flower, which popped because all we did was outline the black streaks that form the flower. I hope that really inspires you to really just have some fun with your quilted panels. And again, if you want to walking foot, straight line quilt some of this stuff, we got projects for you. That's fine. Nothing wrong with that. But I wanted to show you all the different levels of quilting that you could do with a panel, because sometimes you just want something quick and fast, and that's great. That's the point of a panel. And sometimes you have something like this where you really want to bring it to life with your quilting choices. And in that case, something simple, something all over might not work best for you. And so this is an example of where you can really go nuts and really challenge yourself as a free motion quilter. So the pattern for the quilted wall hanging is available in my new book, The Panel Quilting Workshop, and it is available over at stephaniesebing.com. You can get a signed copy there. If you do get it from Amazon, please click on the link in the video description so you can grab it there, because I get a few extra cents for that. I do make the most when you get it from me, so I really appreciate that when you order it direct from me as well. All right, until next time, happy quilting.